What is Mechanization Man? The Summit Lighthouse Encyclopedia has this to say. We see that fallen angels were cast down into the earth in judgment of their failure to bend the knee before Christ the Lord. These fallen angels and their laggard races who came to this planet had great scientific knowledge. They knew the mysteries of creation, and through genetic engineering, they were able to create human bodies. And so their creation has multiplied. These are known as Mechanization Man, to distinguish from those who have the divine spark, who have an I am presence, who have a holy Christ self. As children of God, we have a divine spark. We have a threefold flame. So we are not Mechanization Man. Yet, we must guard against becoming mechanized, and that is to be responding as a machine, as one who is conditioned to the manipulations of the fallen ones. The source of our teaching today is a book called The Soulless One, Cloning a Counterfeit Creation. And this was put together. It is a series of dictations by our beloved great divine director, and it was pulled together by our messenger, Mark Prophet. These teachings are also memorialized in Pearls of Wisdom that are available online if you would like to refer to them. They begin in volume 8, number 3. Now, even before preparing for today's teaching, I've often thought to myself that we've been a very long time without a messenger. And I wondered if we had one in the physical, what they might say to us about the scientific, medical, and technological developments of the past 20 or so years. And I was drawn to the last chapter in the book, and one sentence jumped out at me. Precious ones, if the ascended masters were to take every possible condition which you might encounter and speak upon it, the volume of our words would be ponderous indeed. The back cover of the book also has a short paragraph that reads, thousands of years ago, the earth was host to alien beings. With technological wizardry, they influenced every aspect of our lives. They manipulated the genetic pattern. They altered the very fabric of thought, and they created a counterfeit race of soulless human automatons programmed to the ways of death. Now we know they beguile with their words, with their temptations and their creations. And we as light bearers must be ever vigilant and ever on guard against these wiles, lest we be drawn into their deceptions. What I've been drawn to speak of today is a reflection of their tools of both figurative and literal manipulation. And indeed, they have become more and more sophisticated. In Pearl number 13, the great divine director says to us, the exigencies of social religious pressure in which an attempt is made to corral mankind as into branded herds, and the painfully confusing separations engendered thereby are a blot upon the hopes of the world for peace and unity. Doctrine and tenet of faith and belief have often been a mechanical crib, confining the soul to acceptability and creed without benefit of ultimate truth. Final truth comes about through personal experience with God and is based upon the law of transcendence, upon the transcendental nature of being whereby God, truth, is not found to be static, but in a constant state of self-revelation and self-realization. As I prepared for today, what I was drawn to was a visualization of 3 layers. The very bottom layer, the base, if you will, is the layer of mass consciousness. And we know that this is where we are confronted with all kinds of energies, both positive and negative. So from that layer of mass consciousness, we must rise up to the level of discernment, the mid layer, if you will. We must repel those things which mechanize human beings and also guard against being unwitting and unwilling contributors by feeding their efforts with negative energy. Through our discernment, we rise to the top layer, which is the layer of liberation and freedom. It is freedom won through trial. It is a freedom that comes to each one in his own time, but it is a freedom nonetheless. It is our inalienable right of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that allows us to transcend and rise to that level of liberty. And so important is our individual pursuit that Saint Germain ensured it was enshrined in our Declaration of Independence. In volume 8, again, this is the volume of the Pearls of Wisdom, the very first pearl that the master gives to us, number 3, he calls it a manifesto. And he says to us, now I will realize that we give here what is very definitely an advanced phase of our instruction, and we give it to those at all levels and so state for the record. Our reason for doing this, in order that even the uninitiated in this day and age who require it might have some form of protection against the manipulation of the social structure by man, as well as the manipulation of individuals by one another. For these human manipulators are under the direction of nefarious forces which exist in the world as antichrist, with the expressed intent of aborting the very Christ plan and design by which God himself hath made all things. The latest strides in molecular science and the understanding of the chemical composition and cellular structure of the human embryo suggest the imminence of this achievement. Old religious theories concerning the creation become outworn as men find in scientific accomplishment an explanation for all things. And men are even ready to deny the existence of God, the creator, on the basis that he is no longer needed since man can simulate creation himself. Now, I do not desire to discourage men from probing the universe, but I would point out that there are those who presume still further to consider that it would be possible for them to create souls to inhabit bodies, which they expect to create. Now, this manifesto, this series of pearls, this was given to us in 1965. Just consider how far our developments have leapt since then. So let us reflect on the innovations of our generation. Let's consider the concept of transhumanism, which is the belief that the race can evolve beyond physical and mental limitations via the use of science and technology. The masters have counseled us repeatedly over the years to turn off the television set. What might they say of those of us who carry around handheld computers in the form of smartphones and are always plugged into them? What would they say of social media? Now, all things come with pros and cons, certainly. Apps, video games, and other online tools have been found to be beneficial to neural health. We have an incredible form to access information, but everything in moderation, right? So what's the downside? In young children, screen time is associated with poorer language development, executive function, and with potential adverse impact on neural development. In school-age children, more screen and less reading time are associated with decreased brain connectivity in the parts of the brain that control word recognition and language and cognitive control and impact reading comprehension. Across all age groups, there is greater social isolation and negative impact on the development and quality of social skills and interactions. More face-to-face contact allows for better recognition of verbal and nonverbal communication and emotional cues. Did you know that the brain gets a hit of dopamine, the chemical linked to happiness, when those little alarms go off on the phone, alerting you to the fact that you got an email or a ping on social media, or there is a news headline streaming into your device? And positive experiences release dopamine. Dopamine acts as a motivator. So isn't it a paradox that looking to the electronic world for happiness and responding to those cues and getting that rush of dopamine actually looks to more fully erode our human connections over time and precipitate more isolation? So let's dwell for another moment on the impact of our children. There is a series of schools developing around the country called Waldorf schools, and they're actually a return to the way my generation was taught in the classroom with pads and pencils and human interaction. Waldorf schools eschew digital tools largely. So I pulled the following off their website. We know media use in children can lead to sleep problems, poor self-regulation, lower grades, and personal contentment levels, increased hostility, anxiety, obesity, and depression. It also changes brain structure in a way that could feed addiction. Those who are labeled as addicted to media also suffer notable brain structure changes. This correlates with a study showing a 1/3 decline in attention spans thanks to our media-heavy world. Now consider this from an article in a Business Insider publication. There's a school in Silicon Valley that doesn't allow the use of any tech. It's called the Waldorf School. Now these schools are popping up all over the country, not just on the West Coast. And it's fascinating because the school has no computers, no iPads, no cell phones, no iPhones rather. They try to minimize tech altogether so people enjoy a lot of face-to-face time. They go outside a lot. What's interesting about this school is 75% of the students there are the children of Silicon Valley exec techs. That's striking. These are people who publicly will expound on the wonders of the products they're producing, and at the same time, they've decided in all their wisdom that their kids didn't belong in a school that used the same tech. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, is it a way of being covertly mechanized? As people become more integrated in a world driven by screens and artificial intelligence and leave the normal world of social interaction, it's hugely important to be with other human beings. Even when fraught with discord and challenges in our day-to-day interactions, those interactions provide the opportunity to balance our karma and to fulfill our divine plan. Are we actually being deprived through the digital age of opportunities to accelerate on the path of our ascension? And how does that mechanize us, you might ask? Computers have great benefit: knowledge, communication, convenience. Yes, the benefits are there, as we've explored the downside of computers, as they have the potential to mechanize us. Isn't it mechanization to be the servant of a bell, an alert, or a beep? Isn't that conditioning? Isn't that a tool by which to mechanize us? In number 16, the master says, their control of entertainment media and the trends of youth toward dissonant art forms and discordant music has perverted noble attitudes and spawned a race of delinquent rebels whose code, or lack of it, has gnawed at the vital future of America and the people of many nations. Modern means of communication and distribution of the printed word, the spoken word, and the dramatic word through television and motion pictures have caused ideas to span continents and the world almost at the speed of light. Like a prairie fire, the dry grass consumes itself to the roots of the hopes of mankind, which are blighted then by the searing infamy of wasted energy and emotion. Let me say that again. The searing infamy of wasted energy and emotion. Think sometimes on how the World Wide Web can draw you in. You go to research one item and next thing you know, you're taken down this path into all other links. And then social media fits right into what the master's telling us. Consider how negative people are willing to be when they hide behind a keyboard and a screen, and how utterly nefarious and negative some of the channels are. Where a man is mechanized, a man can be controlled. So we've had computers. Now we come to the smaller form of computer, which is the chip. You can have a small chip planted in the back of your hand. And this is being touted as an amazing convenience because with the swipe of your hand, you can unlock doors, drawers have access to various places in your home or business. Your chip can also store information. You can store your social media accounts, links to websites, and even your credit card information. Modern technology, which is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Those conveniences, as long as you know what's in your chip. Certainly your information is stored in there, but how do you know what else is in the chip? What's in there that you may not know about? Think about it in terms of the World Wide Web. You can go onto the internet and enter the most obscure word or phrase, and all of a sudden links to different sites come back to you. So certainly someone is out there compiling and organizing and creating a way for this information to merge. So if that's being done with sources of information, what's being stored about us? What is our interaction with the web and the cloud enable to be put aside in a compartment to access information that is relevant and relative to our own individual lives? So it's interesting also, as we talk about the digital age, that in March of this year, our president issued an executive order on ensuring responsible development of digital assets. So we've talked about computers, we've talked about the classroom, we've talked about the convenience of chips. Now we're talking about digitizing our currency. Section 4 reads, sovereign money is at the core of a well-functioning financial system, macroeconomic stabilization policies, and economic growth. My administration places the highest urgency on research and development efforts into potential design and deployment options of a United States central bank digital currency. These efforts should include assessments of possible benefits and risks for the consumer, investors, and businesses, financial stability and systemic risk, payment systems, national security, the ability to exercise human rights, financial inclusion and equity, and the actions required to launch a United States central bank digital currency if doing so is deemed to be in the national interest. Just imagine a digital currency where everything is tracked down to the last penny. Now, this conditioning, if you think back, actually began with the advent of credit cards, right? More and more people carry credit and debit cards that they actually carry physical cash in their wallets today. Now, consider also that we know what happened to the Canadian truckers who challenged Prime Minister Trudeau's COVID policies. He froze their assets. How much easier and further reaching might this be when money is digitized? A country where there is no hard currency. Imagine a day when you're not able to keep cash on hand for an emergency. There just isn't any such thing. It all disappears at the whim of government. Because of a natural disaster, the power grid going down, your ability to transact is gone. It has just disappeared. Now, is it not mechanization when the ability to transact and what you are allowed to transact is held in the control of another? Now, what of our bodies? We've talked about the subtleties intruding into our brains, the possibility of our financial activities being restricted. So let's now think of our physical bodies. Now, I had always known that the masters had given us teachings, I've heard them over the years, on the manipulation of DNA. I was not aware until I began my research today that they actually referred to RNA as well. So again, I draw from the Summit Lighthouse Encyclopedia the following on genetic engineering. The genetic engineering of the human race and the lower creatures became the modus operandi for controlling God and God-man. And it was precisely this violation of the RNA and DNA chains that interfered with and severely curtailed man's relationship to God. Through the control of the brain waves and the neurological system with its delicate balance and the interchange of the life force from spiritual man through the chakras to the organs and cells of generic man, the sons of Belial altered humanity's genetic capacity for soul or solar awareness. So I dove a little deeper and I wanted to understand what the differences are between DNA and RNA. So DNA replicates and stores genetic information. It's the blueprint for all genetic information contained within an organism. Now, RNA converts that genetic information contained within the DNA to a format used to build proteins. RNA converts the genetic information contained within the DNA to a format used to build proteins. This struck me in particular. I would be surprised if there is anyone among us that is not aware of the mRNA technology that's been used to develop vaccines these past couple of years. And to be clear, mRNA technology has been out there. It's been under research for quite a while, and it teaches the body how to make its own medicine. Areas of focus have been infectious disease, immune oncology, personalized cancer vaccines, autoimmune, and cardiovascular diseases. For me, it begs the question, if they cannot, meaning the fallen ones, manipulate our individual DNA, are they looking to find ways to reverse engineer us to be compliant, to mechanize us, by introducing a variety of ways to manipulate our RNA so that that in turn converts genetic information within our bodies. So this brought me, in my path of research, to an executive order that was issued this September by our president, an executive order on advancing biotechnology and biomanufacturing innovation for a sustainable, safe, and secure American bioeconomy. And in a paragraph I extracted here reads as follows: the need to develop genetic engineering technologies and techniques, now listen carefully, to be able to write circuitry for cells and predictably program biology in the same way in which we write software and program computers, unlock the power of biological data, including through computing tools and artificial intelligence. And with all things, we know that there's an upside and a downside to our advances. Medicine has absolutely made great strides in these past few generations. At the same time, we know that the Hippocratic Oath has not been universally upheld. So we've discussed now what I put before you, what I feel are threats insofar as manipulating us psychologically, physically, and micromanaging our lives. Manipulating and suppressing our free will. And now, why have I brought this forth? What's my point? As light bearers, we tend to know what we're up against. So why have I gone through all this? Now, remember when I first introduced the topic, I spoke of the layers, the base layer being the mass consciousness, the mid, our need for discernment, and then the top or the capstone, we could even think of this as a pyramid, as our path and our ultimate freedom. So now I'll draw from the various pearls, additional pearls that the master's given us from the book of the Soulless One, and I'll try to apply them to what I brought forth here. Now, of course, the teachings themselves, the pearls, are from the perspective of a spiritual path, right? The ascension, false pastors and gurus, the lies that are fed to us, and yet I feel that therein are woven practical applications that we can make use of in our daily interactions in our physical lives. And also the last few years of national and international conflict, intensification of hatred, censorship, and governments exerting more and more control, causing divisiveness, led me to be reminded of the need for neutrality. As above, so below. To be as God, the impersonal personality, we must be aware, but yet we must be in the world and not of the world. So let us begin with the first level, the mass consciousness, or the base of the pyramid. The Master says in Pearl number 5 on creation, to be free from responsibility is not freedom, but bondage. For freedom is the power to create without strain or sense thereof, and without involvement in the mechanics of nature. Now, our Saint Germain has said to us many times that fear is a poor counselor. To relinquish our individual control to an individual, a group, or a government is bondage. Submission resulting from fear subjugates us. In Pearl number 8, the Master speaks of frequency. Precious ones, you cannot give power to evil and reap good thereby. Dominion is established by acceptance of your divine right to express the perfection of paradise in your world. Complacency has brought about a weakening of mankind's will to do good and the blind mechanical acceptance of whatever life seems to throw at them. The self-imposed yokes and tyrannies which have been accepted by you since early childhood from the mass mind, almost as a hypnotic effect, must be broken by the establishment of patterns of divine grace. Do you ever feel like the national and the international scene is so far gone that we'll never get it back? Do you ever feel overwhelmed by the chaos and all those negative activities that we're seeing going on around us? Do you ever feel overloaded? Beware of this as another trap. As the fallen ones hurl these things and create these conflicts in an effort to make us feel overwhelmed, to break us, to break our spirit, and to beat us into submission. We must be aware of this and we must resist. They're pulling out all the stops we know, and yet it can be burdensome to us, so we must be ever vigilant against this as well. The Master goes on to say, precious ones, mankind do almost mechanically accept the fads, styles, and trends fostered upon them by those who are able to manipulate the social structure of the planetary body to their own ends. I am certain that many among mankind do recognize that the seeds of disobedience, rebellion, distrust, suspicion, and crimes against both state and person, as well as those against the Godhead, are well implanted within the consciousness of mankind. The trends of life to the present hour, whether plebeian or aristocratic, earthly or ethereal, are the result of a combination of internal momentums and external modes, which appear on the screen of life to the eye of mankind as a molding factor to create their habit patterns. Remember, just a moment ago, the Master said, to accept these conditions and give them power is to remain in bondage. To determine to be victor is half the battle. So I see a double whammy here. Not only are we dealing with the mass consciousness around us, but we have our own momentums of prior lifetimes to overcome. Is it really a small wonder that sometimes we do get drawn into these activities and these energies? It truly again highlights the need to be so ever vigilant against the snares of the wicked. As I said earlier, they beguile, they entice. It's a psychological onslaught that is intense. And with our human psychology of wanting to fit into our families, our communities, organizations, it can be difficult to resist these pulls. They're objects of distraction, if you will. And let's consider now, what are the latest styles and trends? What have we seen in the past few years? There has been a push to sacrifice personal autonomy for the greater good, to isolate for the greater good, to villainize those that do not embrace a particular narrative, and to denounce those who do not follow. The current trends are those of coercion to fear, to anger, to judgment, to criticism, and to hatred. And by letting these momentums infiltrate our own consciousness, we feed the beast. Again, the impersonal personality. In the name of Saint Germain, I will not be moved. Let us be the calming presence and not be drawn into that mass consciousness. President Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided itself against itself cannot stand." Think of what the world looked like before the pandemic. People everywhere were waking up. In America, we were uniting. We remembered who we were, who we are, what this beautifully divine sponsored nation stood for. We were excited. We were on fire, and we wanted to recapture that and reclaim it. And we were brethren. We were united as Americans. And that flame of freedom was burning across the entire planet, if you remember. So what happened? The fallen ones unleashed a virus to douse the flames of freedom everywhere. They isolated us physically. Now they use their tools to keep us divided against one another. They seek to interfere with our interactions in the various ways of keeping us divided and not coming together under a banner of unity. And I'll say again, as the master said, to accept these conditions and give them power is to remain in bondage. We must be diligent in recognizing the traps. The fallen ones rely on predictable, mechanical responses of men to feed the mass consciousness of hatred and separation, and to keep that cycle going. The master goes on, to determine to be victor is half the battle. The other half is the uphill climb of the apex of attainment, where the new cosmic sense, replacing old momentums, can then take over and establish the kingdom of God with a momentum which will counterbalance mankind's degrading downward pull. Moving to pearl number 9, he speaks of grids. Now, because of the law of harmonics dealing with affinities, like seeks out like, and therefore a strengthening occurs in the strata of misqualified energy, as well as in that of properly qualified energy, as line upon line of similarly qualified vibrations are added thereto. Many have noted that in spiritual places, temples, and churches, they can receive a greater inrush of peace than in the busy streets and businesses of the outer world. Now, is it really any surprise that in the height of the pandemic, our First Amendment right to the free practice of our religion was trampled on, that it was pulled out from under us? A time when God's word and his presence would have been on the lips of all, and we should have been allowed to assemble in groups or not, based on our own discernment and our own calling. That was shut out to us. Now consider then what it says of each of us as human beings and leaders of houses of faith that willingly succumbed to that freedom and bent the knee to that secular God. The master goes on. Let all take into account then how very important in the law governing affinitized vibration. Likewise, let all examine the fact that the solar plexus as a center, unless guarded, may become a doorway through which negative vibrations enter to bring about a descent of the levels of normally happy consciousness, clouding the sun of man's being with the thoughts of fear or threat, foreboding, or danger. And again, I'm reminded of the mantra from our beloved Saint Germain, in the name of Saint Germain, I will not be moved. The great divine director continues, it is not my wish to have the student body overly conscious of these conditions, yet precious ones. It is not wise to be wholly unconsciously subject to them either. Therefore, in a state of perfect mental and spiritual balance, mankind ought to understand that these conditions do exist and that they function almost mechanically. This means then, precious ones, that those who permit themselves to be subject to vibratory actions of fear, anger, human viciousness or hatred, or even a sense of wrong or injustice may draw to themselves from various parts of the planet either small or large focuses of the exact type of the quality of negation they permit to play through their mind and feeling consciousness. Is it not a sound argument then for the constant maintenance of thoughts of beauty, holiness, protection, and grace? Now think of how often, in how many pearls the masters have counseled us to maintain our harmony. When our harmony is disturbed, our attunement goes right out the window and we become vulnerable. So let us now move to that next layer, that layer of discernment that we must rise into above the influence of the mass consciousness. In pearl number 7, the master speaks of error. It is not an easy thing, beloved ones, from the standpoint of the human, to sense the multitudinous pressures of existence and to be able to determine accurately which impulses to accept and which ones to reject. One of the reasons your beloved Saint Germain and beloved Jesus have so often stressed the keeping of your attention upon your divine presence is because such untrammeled heights of being hold no thought whatever of imperfection within them, and they therefore are a harbor of great safety for the unascended consciousness. It is, however, a present factor of man's curious nature to explore many avenues of consciousness, and hence your beloved St. Paul, now the great master Hilarion, so often admonished the early Christians to put on the whole armor of God and as effective deterrent of the forces of evil. If we're attuned, we are able to set the Christic example for others to follow. We can be the example. We cannot force anyone to come along with us, but we can be that stabilizing factor in a world of chaos. And yet, while we do this, again, deferring to each man's individual free will, we can entice them, we can try and coerce them, but we must respect their right to come along or not. In pearl number 16, the master talks of non-man. As many of you know from the history of America and other parts of the world, the fear of mankind can be very great, and when unleashed against those who may be wholly innocent, it can have disastrous results. A case in point is the Salem witchcraft trials, when many innocent young maidens were burned to death at the stake simply because they expressed views singularly apart from the mainstream human opinion. Therefore, great care must be exercised by mankind today in ferreting out upon the planet those individuals who belong in the classification of the wicked, lest the innocent lambs suffer for their deeds. Keep in mind, today we are seeing both sides, all different factions, villainizing those who disagree with them. The master goes on, let me hasten to assure you then that there do exist upon the planet creatures who did not come forth from God, who are the counterfeit of the real manifestation. They seek through conspiracy and plot to ravish the world of its good, to set brother against brother, to confuse, disturb, and destroy harmonies wherever they exist. And I'll remind us again, we must recognize this for what it is and remember that we are brethren. Now let us move to that third level, the level of freedom. This is the capstone, if you will, the realm of free will and our liberation. In pearl number 15, on man, the master says, for your own mighty I am presence is the fullness to all that you desire. And I urge that the result of this release of knowledge shall be that you will turn more and more to God for your supply of every good thing, that you will determine more than ever to be alert to assist the mankind of earth in overthrowing absolutely all that is darkness and shadow and pain upon the earth planet. In order to do this and to break the monstrous plots which the sinister energies have launched upon mankind, harmony and unity must remain the fort of all who love the light. Again, we're reminded of harmony. He speaks also of unity. There is more division and divisiveness than ever within families, within close circles, given the politics of the day, the handling of the pandemic, and how to correct the problems, the many problems that afflict us. We can be united even when we disagree, and we can vigorously disagree. The beauty of our decrees is that all we need do is surrender to God and the masters for perfect outcome. Isn't that the reason we offer our decrees? We have a sense of what to call for, but we can't ultimately decide what God's will is and how to deliver us from these problems. All we can do is lay it upon the altar of God and the masters and let them find the perfect solution. We can agree to disagree on everything under the sun. However, we must agree to disagree. And when we come before our altars and into our sanctuaries, we must be the impersonal personality, and we must put that divisiveness aside. If we embody ascended master principles, we can be harmonious and united in our spiritual work, and we can overcome. We'll pass our tests, and we will restore America, and ultimately, we will reclaim the planet. In Pearl number 21, the Master speaks of salvation. Security and salvation are the longings of mankind, but there is no security in what might be appropriately termed a bomb shelter consciousness, which seeks to preserve itself in a world where destruction is both imminent and actual. Here, culture, love, and spiritual attributes are often shattered by the violence of misguided youth and age alike. Here again, our freedom lies in being in the world and not of the world. Be not chained by fear, fear of loss, fear of harm, or fear of death, but be love. In the darkness, each of us can be that single candle that illuminates that darkness. In Pearl number 22, the Master speaks of thee. Let us by truth counteract the mimicry of the mechanical hordes. Percentage-wise, now listen, percentage-wise, the creations we have termed mechanical man are few in proportion to the number of individuals in the world who are the true creation of God and parts of this planetary evolution. Percentage-wise, they are few in proportion. It doesn't feel like that some days, does it? They have the platform of the media, and they silence those who oppose their rhetoric and their desires of what to bring upon the planet and upon mankind. So we have to remember that the strength in numbers, and certainly light bearers united under the banner of God. And as the saying goes, with God as an army, and if God be for us, who can be against us? As I read this particular section of the Pearl, I myself was mildly amused at the thought of the disproportion of what they project they are in terms of strength versus what they actually are. And I was reminded of a pufferfish. A pufferfish is a smallish fish that has the ability to take water into their physical bodies and expand and expand and expand, so they appear much larger in size to their predators, and therefore they are able to stave off being someone's dinner. So in closing, I would just like to remind everyone that we must be alert to the tools that mechanize us, that take away our individual autonomy, our independence, and our free will. Some of the tools are subtle, and they're couched in the logic of the day, and many individuals will view these benign tools and think that they actually are to the benefit of mankind. We must be astute and vigilant, and we must rise to that level of discernment. Their tools sit in the mass consciousness of Earth. By maintaining our harmony and not succumbing to the negative vibrations, we can rely on the guidance of our I Am presence to point the way. Now, let me remind us of our scriptural reading, Leviticus, right? This is a calling away, God calling the Israelites, and for us, the I Am race, to come away and be a separate people. With discernment comes freedom, to be in the world and to be free of mortal attachment. This is our exodus. It is our taking that directive from God in Leviticus to be a separate and dedicated people to our beloved God. It is our coming away. And we collapse their system by refusing to participate, by refusing to become mechanical and allowing ourselves to be drawn into their mechanization plots. We are sons and daughters of the Most High God, not mechanical wind-up toys of the fallen ones. Let's know it and let's live it. Beloved great divine director, thank you, thank you, thank you for these words of wisdom, reminding us of who we are and who we ought not to become, and to remind us of those tools and to be on guard against mechanization man, for we are children of the light, and by God's grace we shall prevail. Amen.